Hello friends, welcome back to Cosmopolitan Cornbread. So I am here in my pantry. I've been kind of doing a little bit of reorganizing, trying to make this shelving work best for me while I have it. You may recall that at our Alabama homestead I had completely built custom shelving into that pantry. I had shelves that were the exact height for pint jars or quart jars and things like that, and it really utilized every inch of potential storage space in that pantry. I had tucked away shelving behind the door for like cleaning supplies. I had a can rack that I had built on the wall. If you're interested in that, I'll put a link to that video in the description down below this one, so you can check that out. But when we were moving in here, I didn't really have time to be building a pantry. We were moving, we had animals to get situated and all of that. And so I just got this metal shelving and put it in here. And it's doing the job, but you can see like this shelf, how this is all pint jars. We've got all this space that's wasted up above it. And so, you know, I've just kind of been thinking about how I could maybe reconfigure these shelves, or really just think about building permanent wooden custom shelving like I did at the other house. Now I'm going to be doing more videos about pantry storage and things like that in the future. However, very specifically, I want to talk about those buckets right down there. A while back I was doing a video where I was baking some bread, and in that video you could see me scooping and measuring my flour, my bread flour, out of one of these great big food grade buckets. And I had a lot of questions about storing my flour in those buckets. So today I'm just going to briefly talk about specifically storing flour. Now, when you buy your flour at the grocery store, of course, it's not going to last a long time in those paper bags. They generally last about 6 to 10 months tops in just your paper packaging that the flour comes in, but you can greatly lengthen the amount of time that your flour stays good just by changing out what you store your flour in. So in the original packaging, it would last 6 to 10 months, but by taking that flour and vacuum sealing it inside plastic bags, you can double its shelf life from 6 to 10 months to 1 to 2 years. Now, vacuum sealed bags, plastic bags, aren't really made for long-term storage. So if you're wanting to look for an idea for storing your flour for a longer period of time, then you want to look at something else. Storing your flour in airtight containers is always going to be better than the original store-bought paper sack. Your airtight containers are going to protect your flour from moisture, from bugs, from smells that might be in your pantry. I mean, you have some onions go bad and that is really going to stink things up. And you don't want your flour absorbing those smells and messing up the flavor of your flour. So to drastically lengthen the lifespan of your flour, you want to store it in airtight containers like mason jars or food grade plastic buckets, depending upon how much flour that you have to store. Now, when it comes to using the food grade buckets, you do want to make sure that the lid you use isn't just the cheap plastic kind of snap-on lid that a lot of buckets will come with. You want to make sure that the bucket lid that you're using has a gasket to make it completely airtight. I like to use these lids. They're called Gamma Seal lids, and they've really come down in price. They used to be really expensive, but nowadays you can find them much more easily, which has caused the price to come down. But what I love about these is they're almost like a giant canning lid because it has the outer ring that snaps onto the top of the bucket, and then you can unscrew this piece to get access to what you have inside. But these lids have this nice big rubber gasket in there, so when this snaps onto the bucket, it is completely airtight. But whether you're storing your flour in mason jars or food safe buckets, the one thing that you really want to look at to include to make sure the flour lasts the longest is these oxygen absorbers. If you want your flour to last as long as possible in the airtight container, you must include oxygen absorbers. However, the one thing that's really important to know about these is you have to match the size of your container to the oxygen absorber. These ones in particular that I have here are actually made for 5-gallon buckets, and they're pretty big. It goes, let's see, right there. That's how big these ones are. But they're made for very large containers, like 5-gallon buckets. They come in all different sizes. You can get them for 1 gallon. You can get them for quart containers. You just want to make sure that you match your oxygen absorber to whatever size container you're storing your flour in. Storing your flour in an airtight container, whether it is a mason jar or a food grade bucket with an oxygen absorber, will extend the life of your flour to up to 5 years. But now for the longest long-term storage for your flour, the route you're going to want to go is Mylar. This is a Mylar bag that is filled with some dried herbs that I actually purchased, but you can get these Mylar bags all over the place. I've purchased them from Amazon. I've gotten them from I think Asia Standard. You can get them all sorts of different places. Now, Mylar bags completely block out moisture and air and smells and light to extend the life of whatever you have stored inside. But just like with storing your flour inside airtight containers needs an oxygen absorber, so does the Mylar bag. So again, you want to match the size of your container with the size of the oxygen absorber. And if you store your flour in them, it can last up to 15 years for white flour or 10 years for whole wheat flour. Now, of course, any way that you store your flour, you do want to make sure you're storing it at a proper temperature. You don't want to have your flour in a hot and humid environment. No food should be stored that way if at all possible. But one thing I do recommend though, anytime you're bringing home flour and you want to store it for any length of time, it is a great idea to freeze it before you store it. No matter how big the package is, if you've got room in your freezer, go ahead and stick it in there for about 4 days. And what that will do is if you've got any kind of bugs, any kind of anything that might be in the fold of the paper or anything like that, it'll kill it. Because if you bring home a bag of flour and it's got some mealworms in there, they're not going to stay in that one bag. They are going to spread and you're going to find them in anything that they can get into. So bring it home from the store, stick it in the freezer, freeze it for about 4 days. That'll make sure there's nothing living in there. Then bring it out, let it return to room temperature, and go ahead and package it up however you choose to do so. Now, of course, when I'm using my flour in the jars or the buckets, and it's the flour that I'm using on a regular basis, I don't have oxygen absorbers in there. Those are saved just for my long-term storage. So the bucket or the container that I'm actively using and baking from, those ones I don't need to worry about that. That flour is still going to be good for the amount of time that it would take me to go through the bucket or container of flour. Alright, so I hope you find that information helpful. Like I said, I will talk more about pantry storage in future videos. We can talk about some different tips that I might be able to share with all of you. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments down below. And you can check out the video where I talk about the pantry storage that I had built in our last homestead. And one last note, I just want to mention those of you who have joined the Cornbread crew, if you have not already emailed me at the special email address, be sure to reach out to me because I need some information from you so that you can claim your extra perks. So that is it for today. Thanks for hanging out with me here in the Homestead Pantry. My name is Constance from Cosmopolitan Cornbread, and I'll talk to you all next time.